Welcome, everyone, again to EMDR Chat with Kurt and Michelle. I'm Dr. Curtis Roundsen.
And I am Dr. Michelle Gottlieb, and I'm really excited today because we are having guests again, which is always exciting for us. But Kurt, the reason I'm so excited for these guests, do you remember way back in 2019 and 2020 in the pandemic, and all of a sudden we were all locked in our houses and we couldn't come out and see clients, and we all went, how are we going to do this? And how are we going to do the bilaterals with EMDR therapy, right?
Well, and before COVID, of course, the thought of doing this virtually would have been considered unethical and unprofessional.
Right? And so, but we, what were we going to do is just dump all our clients, for the pandemic. Well, that is also unethical. So we all pivoted and found ways to make it work. And we all started having our arms fall off because we were back to doing, the eye movements with our arms. And
on a computer screen.
On a computer screen as we were trying to figure out this whole thing. Well, our guests today are two gentlemen who, I want them to tell their story because it's a really cool story about how they developed it. But they created a way to do the bilaterals virtually. They are the founders of Bilateral Stimulation IO, Benjamin and Yanick, and we are so glad that you guys are here. So please introduce yourselves and tell the story of how this all came about.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Michelle. Hi, Kurt. Pleasure being here. This is Yanick from bilateralstimulation.io. And it's funny the way you described it, because I remember I was a client of EMDR in 2019. And after doing it in person, I told my therapist, hey, this was amazing. I didn't expect the kind of results that I got from it. And I told him, what if you do this online? And he told me, that sounds cool, but nobody's doing therapy online, let alone EMDR. And that was really, the status quo back then, right? And then a year later, the pandemic hit, and he emailed me and he said, I really need something to do it online now because we're all in lockdown. And, this idea you had back then would be really useful now. So I ended up building the initial version of our online BLS software for my therapist at the beginning of COVID. And I kind of thought, okay, he and two of his friends are going to use it and COVID's going to be over in 2 weeks. And it came very differently. COVID went on for a lot longer. The tool started to see a lot of adoption in the EMDR community. And nowadays, we have around 30,000 therapists using it to do visual, auditory, and also tactile bilateral stimulation for their online clients. So it was quite a journey. We learned a lot about EMDR, about online EMDR. We've been doing it for 5 years now. I actually met my therapist again recently at a EMDR conference, and it was quite nice. Kind of a closing the circle moment. He's still using the tool as well. And excited to talk about all that.
Lovely. Benjamin, you want to add anything to that?
Yes, first of all, also thanks from my side for having us. Great to be here in the podcast. And Yanick mentioned most of the things already of our founding story. For me, it was Yanick and myself, we met each other more than 10 years ago while being on exchange semester, actually in the US, in Los Angeles at USC. And then we both ended up living in Berlin, working on different tech ventures. And then, as Yanick mentioned, COVID hit, and he came back from the US with this experience he had with his therapist and this prototype he built of bilateralstimulation.io. And I, at that time, have never heard about EMDR therapy. And then this crazy venture began, I think, in the first couple of weeks or months when we started to work on this. We talked to several hundred therapists, learning all about it, learning all the demands. And then, we really developed the tool together with the therapy community, which was a great experience.
It's amazing how necessity is the mother of invention. Things come when there's often some sort of global crisis. I like to remind our therapists who are being trained that most of them are sitting out there without MDs. And I say, the very fact that we are doing psychotherapy and not being physicians is because of another global crisis, and that was World War II. People came back. Until then, psychotherapy was a medical intervention and non-physicians could not do it. And that's when, 1949, the first psychological training model was introduced with MD people, PhD. So necessity is a mother of invention, and this opportunity arose, and I'm glad it did. It really has helped in the whole therapy. And by the way, the APA did a research about after COVID and found that therapy online, on telephone, or in person seemed to be equally effective during COVID. So that's good news. Yeah.
And have you guys gotten feedback or seen any of the research about EMDR therapy and virtual and being able to use the technology? Are you guys familiar with any of that?
Yeah, of course, we looked into the research. I think one of the most interesting papers that we recently found was there's like a big systematic review of the effectiveness of remote EMDR therapy. They looked at 16 different studies, and like those studies included a total of like more than 1,200 participants across various age groups. And yeah, this systematic review looking at all the different papers confirmed the findings that remote EMDR therapy is effective. Yanick, I think we are also happy to share the link with you so that you can maybe put it in the show notes.
That'd be great.
And
yes.
Yeah. Because, well, we're very firm believers that it's one thing to go, well, that feels right, but do we actually have research to back it up? So I love hearing about the research. Thank you. And
yeah, and if any of the listeners is a researcher, we're also interested in enabling more research. We now have quite a lot of therapists, quite a lot of sessions on our platform, and I think it could be interesting collaborating with researchers to use that to recruit study participants, gather data, gather consent. So yeah, if any of the listeners is interested.
Oh, that's
good.
Great.
Yes,
I'm
thank you.
very excited to hear that. So, you talked about the technology that you guys developed is auditory, tactile, and the eye movements. And the eye movements, of course, make sense. Auditory, right? We put on headphones. Can you just tell a little bit, how on earth would you do tactile?
Yeah, describe it for the people who may not have seen it or are unfamiliar with it. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. So we actually developed our own tappers, our own buzzers that connect to a computer with USB. So when we launched, we only had the visual and the auditory, and then people kept asking us like, hey, this is great, but I'd love to do the tactile online. So eventually we gave into these requests and developed our own hardware that the therapist can plug into their computer or the client can plug into their computer, and then the therapist can control these tappers remotely in an online session.
So that brings me to another question then too. For you guys and hopefully other technology companies as well, is there all of the bilaterals can only be controlled by the clinician? They can't. The client can't just turn it on and start, wildly BLSing themselves, right?
Correct. Yes. So our products are only meant for use by or control by the therapist. So it is something that the therapist uses with their client in an EMDR session, and it's not something that is intended for self-treatment or self-application of BLS. So we only want it to be used by therapists.
Good. Because there are things out there that people can buy online and think they're doing their own EMDR, which is probably not a wise thing to do, particularly if they're dealing with intense trauma. So good.
Yeah. In fact, it's pretty darn scary.
Yeah.
So what do you guys, obviously we're all not going just back into our offices again. I've got a lot of clients going, hey, I love this virtual stuff and I'm never going to step foot in your office again.
I'm never going to be on the freeway that long again to
right.
see you.
Right. Absolutely. Love working with you, but only this way now, right? What do you see just in the field, for the virtual, what do you guys, as you look ahead, what do you see?
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I think our perspective also shifted over time. So I mentioned when it started, I thought, hey, COVID's going to be over in 2 weeks. This is going to be a nice little story. Everybody did online EMDR for like 2 weeks. Wasn't that crazy. But then it turned out quite different, right? And I think people really got quite used to it, and they saw, hey, it works, it's effective. It is safe if done correctly, and it is very convenient, right? And as you guys mentioned, both the therapists as well as the clients, I think, really started to like it. They can do the therapy from their homes. Therapists can work from home. They can spend more time with their families. They don't have to commute. They have fewer no-shows, right? Because clients don't have to travel. They can just do it from home. And I think after COVID, there was a moment where we thought, okay, maybe people are going to be mostly back in person now. And that has not happened. We still see a lot of online. We still see a lot of hybrids, therapists who have some in-person caseload, some remote caseload, or might see the same clients sometimes virtually, sometimes in person. And I think it's kind of here to stay. And it really is up to the therapist and the client to decide, okay, what is the right setup for them for any given session. And I think it's beautiful that this flexibility is now available.
Absolutely.
And one thing that we also see is that there's a lot of cases where people, they wouldn't be able to access therapy without like the online option. So especially if you think, for example, about elderly people who are maybe not that mobile anymore. We had one case where just at the beginning when we developed the buzzers, a therapist, like we only had some prototypes laying around, and a therapist reached out to us and she told us that she just got a new client who was like a firefighter, and he had a dramatic accident at a deployment, and like he was in such a bad condition that he couldn't leave like his house, and like the only way he could, for example, do EMDR therapy was with the buses with tactile, because he was visually impaired, and the auditory didn't work as well. And that was like one example where we then directly shipped like one of our prototype buses to enable this person to do like the therapy. And I think it's one of this prime example, like how many cases are out there where some people just unfortunately don't have the option to go to an office to see a therapist.
Yeah. I don't know about you, Kurt, but my practice probably now is about 50-50 of virtual versus in person.
Yeah, mine too. And it's funny you should mention that. I've used online as a way to deal with the fear of traveling, so that they could come to my office. So the first thing we had to do on virtual was to deal with their fear of driving or leaving their home and all that sort of thing. We did that virtually. And then one of the real tests was they were able to actually drive to my office and continue work in person. So it was very helpful in some of those cases. And it does reach people. The other great thing about this is that it's about people in remote communities.
Mm-hmm.
Think of rural areas where they don't have access to mental health professionals as easily as we do here, those in the city or Southern California, for instance. And people who just don't have access to transportation, as you said, or they have disabilities of some kind that doesn't allow them to leave. This is a godsend in order to provide mental health services to individuals who otherwise simply would not have it. And so this is what makes it so important for those of us that are in the mental health field.
Very, very true. Now, one of the things, like Benjamin, you were just telling the story about the firefighter. And one of the things I've seen with you guys in particular is you are very responsive to what is needed and, making changes, as necessary. What do you see changes for the technology piece for bilaterals online? And where do you see that being developed?
What are some of your dreams about this being developed?
Yeah. So one thing that we just launched that a lot of people asked for was the ability to... So the interesting thing about online, if you compare it to, let's say, in person, bilateral stimulation, is you actually have a bit more tools at your disposal, meaning the computer can also do things for you, and you can do things on the computer that maybe you can't do in person. So for example, one thing we released was the ability to put images in the background. And people have used that very creatively. So a child therapist that we met, she's hybrid as well. She sees her kids in the office, then the kids do drawings. She takes pictures of the drawings and then she uploads them. And then in the online sessions with the same kids, she has these drawings in the background, and it can be safe place, calm place. It can be something related to the trauma as well. It can be exposure, right? And that wasn't really possible before, right? Because you couldn't have like an image in the background as easily, or you couldn't do that online, right? And that's something we recently launched. Another thing is what we call BLS randomization. So what some people find helpful, particularly when maybe the processing is stuck, is to mix up the BLS a bit and to add more taxation. And we added the ability for the BLS to change automatically. Let the computer help you, let the computer do some work for you. And it changes the speed, it changes the color. So it's more dynamic and can be adjusted to the client's needs. And then another thing we want to do in the future, which is cool, is bilateral music. So you upload also your own music, it gets bilateralized, and you can use that as well. So we want to continue to listen also to what people tell us. I think therapists often have very good ideas. So if you have also more things that you think we should look at, feel free to email us.
I love that. Hey, I'm curious, Kurt and I are both from Southern California, and we have colleagues, literally over the world, but what are you seeing in the differences in how people are using the technology in Southern California compared to Germany, compared to wherever? I mean, what are you seeing?
There are many differences. Like we really have therapists using the tool all over the world. We have therapists in Australia, in Japan, in Africa, really in nearly every country. And just to share some small anecdotes. So one thing that when sometimes we get like very regional requests. So we had this one therapist from Australia reaching out to us and ask us if we could add a kangaroo emoji because she was working with children. And of course, for Australia, the kangaroo is very important, right? That was like one small thing. Also, one very interesting thing that we experienced at some of the conferences. So, for example, I think 2 years ago, Yanick and I, we attended a conference in the Netherlands. And then back then we just launched the background image feature that Yanick just mentioned. And when we showed this feature to like therapists in the Netherlands, they all ask us if they can upload images from like the accident that the client experienced. Like they really were focused on exposure therapy. While when we showed the background image feature to therapists at conferences in the US, the requests were more like, can I maybe upload a calming picture of the dog of my client, maybe of like the safe space of my client. So that's like one prime example where we really could see some regional differences. Also, one thing is we know from our data and also from our conversations with therapists that, for example, in Italy, therapists use our tool way more in the traditional way. They rarely use features like the background images. They like to just use the plain horizontal visual BLS, while we see in the US therapists are much more creative, I would say, and use some more new ways that our tool offers as well.
And I think across the board, what we see in basically all the countries that we go to also for conferences is EMDR is growing a lot, as you guys probably know, worldwide, right? A lot of people are getting trained. And we looked at this specifically for the US, and we found that it's actually growing at double the rate in the US than all other therapy is. So, therapy is, of course, growing in general. People become therapists at an increasing rate. People seek therapy at an increasing rate. But within therapy, EMDR is actually growing particularly quickly because I think a lot of therapists see the effectiveness of it.
Right, because it works.
It works.
Right.
and the research continues to support that repeatedly. So, yes, it is.
So now we don't have a lot of time left, but what? Let's say you have a therapist who technology is not their friend, not naming names, Kurt. But what would you say to someone to help them get comfortable with the idea of using the technology in the virtual world? I mean, what do you tell people?
Yeah, maybe start small, step by step. Get comfortable with the video chat software. You can use Zoom, you can use Google Meets, whatever you prefer. Zoom is I think, pretty reliable. Maybe it doesn't trip you up as much, so maybe start with Zoom. Do a trial call with a friend, do a dry run. Maybe start with something simple like the butterfly hug, and then once you feel comfortable with the video chat software and maybe with the butterfly hug, you can start experimenting, layering on more technology, right? And like one aspect that is important to us with our software is we want to keep it as simple and accessible as possible. I regularly talk to users in their 70s who use us, and that's kind of our benchmark. Is like, okay, we want people of all ages to be able to use it, right? Like few clicks, very clear instructions. But yeah, take it step by step, do a dry run, make sure you have like an acceptable webcam quality, microphone quality, stable internet connection, and yeah, take it step by step.
So if Kurt can do it.
Maybe a quick reverse question here. So to what extent does this play a role in your trainings, Kurt and Michelle? Do you talk about like online virtual EMDR?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And we start talking about how, because their clients are virtual, right? So we start talking about it during that very first training because we have a 3-part training. During part 1, we start talking about how do you do this virtually. We do tell them, though, we don't want them to play with technology till they get trained completely, because we want them to figure out how to do this. But then we introduce them to the technology and make sure they know how to do that too.
And the funny part is that many of them come in and they've already been exposed to the technology by a supervisor, by getting their own therapy. So that's the other thing I find increasing. Our participants come in and they already know about some of the virtual tools that are out there. And I think that's very promising. Yeah.
So we are about done, but would you guys please just say how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So our emails are Yanick at bilateralstimulation.io and Benjamin at bilateralstimulation.io, or simply contact at bilateralstimulation.io. So yeah, we love to hear your ideas, your feedback, your questions, and what else we can do to make online EMDR even better for you guys.
And I appreciate the fact you focused on those of us in our 70s, making it very simple. and before we sign up, Michelle, how do I turn this thing off?
Right, exactly.
Thank both of you. Thank both of you for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for making my life easier. I really do appreciate what you offer. Thank you guys very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. And hope to see all of you back at the next podcast.
That's right. Until then, go with that.
Bye, everybody.